Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. Man, I gotta work on the lighting on this. So, yes, we are back to doing the news because it looks like nobody else is really doing it anymore these days. So, today, are we shooting down UFOs? It's a reasonable question to be asking these days. Um, if you haven't been paying attention for the last 3 years, it's it wouldn't be out of the norm to be thinking perhaps we are shooting down something that's not balloons. So, what we have here, I'm going to start out with, and these articles are all found at thecollapseexperiment.com. I'm going to start out with what I think started all of this, which is the Nord Stream sabotage was CIA, U.S. Navy covert ops, Seymour Hersh bombshell prompts White House response. This is through Zero Hedge. And this is Seymour Hersh, who for decades was a star reporter writing for the New York Times and the New Yorker. Wednesday published a new bombshell, his first Substack post prompting a quick White House response. After conducting his own investigation into who sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines via a series of underwater blasts on September 26th, Hirsch has concluded that the United States blew up the Russia to Germany natural gas pipeline as part of a covert operation under the disguise of Baltop's 22 NATO exercise. I seem to remember somebody very, very close to me stating, we did that. It was me. So, yeah, I remember seeing a Pentagon briefing about the Nord Stream pipeline, and they were trying to say, well, obviously it was Russia, that common sense states that it was them. No, common sense did not state that. That is the most BS excuse that I could hear as to why they would think that Russia blew up their own $20 billion pipeline that can't be repaired. So, yeah. The CIA argued that whatever was done, it would have to be covert. Everyone involved understood the stakes, blah, 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 blah. Uh, yeah, so this, I believe, started what we are seeing today. Because not long after that, we had the balloon, the Chinese balloon, the one that went over most of the United States, Montana, all the way over to the Carolinas until it was shot down. And ever since then, things have gotten a little weird, right? So, as we know about the Chinese spy balloon, the only one that is confirmed to be a Chinese spy balloon, right? Uh, contained technology to monitor communication signals. And, I got a lot of flack for posting stuff about this online. Uh, Basically, it's a nothing burger, is what people were trying to tell me. Biden administration officials disclose new information. Let's see here. FBI begins analyzing the parts recovering after the balloon was shot down. Also, detail what they discovered about the broader spying operation they say the Chinese government was undertaken using a fleet of high altitude surveillance balloons. It could monitor U.S. communications. Yes, they're not trying to get topless pictures of you sunbathing. No, they want to know what the heck we're talking about and how we broadcast, possibly disrupting communications. That's a thing. Uh, Still waiting for the payload. So this is without them actually having the large component that was hanging underneath the balloon, and this balloon was over 200 feet tall. So yeah, this was. I think it was also able to carry like a ton or a ton and a half payload. Um, but that was the first one. So then moving on, and I am skipping some articles here that I'm just not going to talk about today. This one's regarding Project Veritas. There's also the Chinese satellite firing green lasers over Hawaii. That's been an ongoing thing. High altitude object over Alaska shot down by F-22. CH-47 helicopters deployed in recovery operation. Yeah, and there's some updates as to that recovery operation as well. The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, blah, 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 blah. The Pentagon cannot say if the object shot down over Alaska was a balloon. It is sure that there was no people on board. Are you? Are you really sure? Pentagon says object shot down over Alaska wasn't an aircraft per se. Then what the hell was it? U.S. military used F-22 aircraft to take down object over Alaska on Friday using a Sidewinder missile. Let's see here. It crashed into the frozen waters near the U.S.-Canadian border. Now, here's the interesting part, and this is what has been repeatedly coming up with these later aircraft that have been shot down. ABC News reporter Martha Raddatz first reported that when fighters were scrambled, the pilots did visuals, got images, and said there was no sign the object had propulsion. It was described as cylindrical and silverish gray and seemed to be floating. So I don't know what description that fits, but if you've been watching or keeping up with anything similar to this since, I don't know, the 90s, watching some X-Files, sounds very familiar. And yeah, there's also, let's see here, traveling at altitude that would make it a potential threat to civilian aircraft. I think that is more of just a BS excuse. There's a lot of sky up there. I don't really see this getting in the way. Let's see here. So yeah, that was number 2. And then we get back to China demands U.S. to explain itself to the world over the Nord Stream attack story. So China's again trying to deflect from their spy operation. Third high altitude. Yeah, this is the third one. One day after the U.S. shot down a cylindrical silverish gray object in the northeast Arctic region of Alaska, another unidentified airborne object was shot down by the U.S. military over northern Canada on Saturday. Yeah, this was over the Yukon Territory. Justin Trudeau asked us to shoot this thing down. Not really any details as to what this one looked like, even though they had to have visually identified the object before shooting it. So this is Justin Trudeau on, I believe this is Twitter. Yeah. I ordered the takedown of an unidentified object that violated Canadian airspace. Let's say they actually like come across this vehicle and there's an ET standing outside and they're like, what the heck were you doing? And they're like, hey, you violated our airspace. And the aliens are like, what is airspace? NORAD command shot down the object over the Yukon. Canadian and U.S. aircraft are scrambled. A U.S. F-22 successfully fired the object. Yeah, and I haven't been able to find an actual description of what this one looked like, but this was the one over Yukon. Airspace over Lake Michigan restricted due to national defense. Interesting. This was the article that really piqued my interest in all of this because we have had UFO sightings in Michigan in the past. For some reason, they end up surrounding the area of Lake Michigan. You can find these stories. I believe one of them is now on the new version of Unsolved Mysteries, where they actually have like the radio recordings of like the police and everybody trying to figure out like what the hell's going on. Let's see here. Notice said that the airspace was restricted for national defense reasons. There was no immediate comment from the Pentagon or the FAA. The closure of the airspace follows the shoot down of a U.S. by a U.S. aircraft of a Chinese spy balloon and two unidentified flying objects, also known as UFOs. Canadian investigators are hunting for the wreckage of the mysterious flying object shot down by the U.S. fighter jet over the Yukon Territory. Recovery teams are on the ground looking to find and analyze the object. The security of citizens is our top priority. Blah, blah, blah. Mm, Perhaps, I don't know. They don't have the right to say that when we still remember lockdowns. Just saying. Chuck Schumer, I don't know why Chuck Schumer is commenting on this stuff. Like he's nobody now, but Chuck Schumer is trying to say they believe they're balloons, yes, but much smaller than the first one. Chuck Schumer should just shut the hell up. Nobody really wants to hear from you, dude. And quite frankly, after all the years of you lying to the US people, why are you the spokesperson for this? And why is anybody listening to you? The White House said that the recently downed object did not closely resemble the Chinese balloon. Yeah. American officials have accused the Chinese of using 200-foot tall balloons for surveillance. Already covered that. FAA abruptly cancels National Defense airspace over Lake Michigan. Yeah, so just as soon as they shut down airspace over Lake Michigan, they went ahead and opened it back up. And here's the weird thing that really stood out to me. Pilots who do not adhere to the following procedure may be intercepted, detained, and interviewed by law enforcement or security personnel. So if they happen to accidentally fly over Lake Michigan during this shutdown, what is it that they're afraid they're going to see? I thought that was really interesting. Um, and then let's see here. We also have these aircraft did not identify any object to correlate with the radar hits. That's the one over Montana. Yeah, the Montana one. That really stood out to me too. New China Now China claims it's tracking unidentified object over Port City. So China's trying to reverse a lot of this, and I don't know if this is actual UFO or not. A lot of people speculate that this is just China trying to say, like, we're not the ones doing this, you're the ones doing this. Now China is jumping on the trend, apparently, as authorities in China say that they have spotted and are tracking an unidentified object over the waters near the port city of Qingdao. Scant details have been given, but the claim was briefly detailed in Bloomberg on Sunday. They are preparing to down the object. Area fishermen and boats in the ports have been alerted and told to follow safety precautions due to the object, which is hovering at an unknown altitude. Yeah, so this is also the same port where they have their only aircraft carrier and several nuclear submarines. So, I mean, if they're going to fake something and they already have a large military presence, why not just do it there where you can control it? According to the latest this weekend, the U.S. has said it shot down a third high altitude object over Canada just a day following a similar intercept of a mysterious object over far northeast Alaska. So, China's now saying that they're going to shoot one of these things down, and it could just be them shooting one of their own things down in order to say, like, hey, see, we didn't do this. Let's see here. I'm actually going to close with this article. Let's see here. U.S. military has decommissioned another object over Lake Huron. Latest object shot down by the U.S. was first detected over Montana on Saturday. The U.S. did not assess latest object to be a military threat to anything on the ground and says object shot down was octagonal structure, but no discernible payload. Let's see here. The Pentagon is expected to give a press conference at 5 p.m. That press conference is actually available at theclassexperiment.com if you want to listen to it. It's about 30 minutes. There's one with the Pentagon, there's one with NORAD. Let's see here. This is Representative Jack Bergman. I've been contacted with the DoD regarding operations across Great Lakes region today. The U.S. military has decommissioned another object over Lake Huron. I appreciate the decisive action by our fighter pilots. Yeah. So this is the fourth one so far. I'm just going to say so far. And this article is actually by the Epoch Times. You can find it on Zero Hedge, although there's a lot of information that is in this one where they actually show the flight plan of the jet that took it down. Canada just closed a section of airspace over Great Lakes near the U.S.-Canadian border due to active air defense operation. That would be the jet that took it out. Talking about airspace being reopened. So yeah, there's also a press release by NORAD. And here's the funny thing, is that the actual, let's see here, moving around here. There's the defense spokesperson gives brief on object shot down over Lake Huron. This one was funny because this was the Pentagon, and the general who was giving the briefing actually referred to it as a UFO. Then he backtracked and was like, the object. So even the Pentagon's just kind of like, we have no idea what the hell these things are. Yeah, here's another article about after the US and Canada, this Asian country spots UFO near Port City. This is again covering China's alleged spotting of a UFO. And they keep using this weird image. I don't know. There's no caption for it per se. Oh, it says image for representation. Okay, so that's not actually from sources over there. So yeah, and I still haven't seen any updates as to whether or not China actually shot this thing down or not. U.S. military recovery of an unidentified object down over Alaska faces severe conditions. Apparently, it's negative 20-something degrees in that area, and they're having trouble reaching the object, which went underwater. Montana airspace briefly closed. FAA blames radar anomaly. This is through Reuters. I'm just gonna butcher it, so I hopefully got it right somewhere around there. The U.S. military said late on Saturday a radar anomaly prompted the temporary closure of airspace to civilian airplanes in Montana, but no threatening object was detected. And this was actually called out as BS. The fact that, let's see here, DoD will resume efforts to observe the ground and object in the morning. Let's see here. There was, I believe it was like a representative or somebody who stated that they did have visual confirmation of the object and that it was a bunch of BS, that it was not an anomaly. And then they backtracked later and said that it was the same object that shut down airspace over Lake Michigan and was shot down over Lake Huron. So, really can't believe what a lot of these officials are saying when it comes to this stuff. So, yeah, are these UFOs? The cylindrical, silverish gray objects with no propulsion. Sounds very similar to a lot of things that have been discussed over the years. There's that Joe Rogan episode where the fighter pilot's talking about the tic tac shaped object. Cylindrical, silverish gray object. that can do all kinds of weird maneuvers. Yeah. This has been an ongoing thing, and these are not fitting the same description as the balloon, the initial balloon. So, did the balloon change policies over things that were you regularly overlooked, and now all of a sudden they're being overly cautious to the point where I don't know, we're going to start like an intergalactic war or some shit? I don't know. Um, Now China claims. Let's see here. I already did that one. This is the actual article I want to close with. And this is not related to the UFOs, although it could be. I'll just say that much. Censorship operations, COVID war, and more. This is by the Brownstone Institute. Wednesday, Congress held a hearing on Twitter's censorship of the New York Post and its coverage of the Hunter Biden laptop. White House Republicans focused on issues like shadow banning and government collusion, with big tech rep Jamie Raskin and other Democrats advocated for increased censorship from Silicon Valley companies. Who are these assholes, and have they not read the Constitution? Like, I will defend their right to say that I don't have the right to speak, but I will also protect my right to speak. They have the right to say that. I have the right to say they're full of shit. Raskin argued that the committee would be better served focusing on the real threats of massive Russian disinformation and White House nationalist violent incitement on social media. White nationalist violent incitement. Did I say White House? I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that. Yeah, so we all know now, thanks to these investigations, that Russian disinformation was complete 100% BS. It did not happen. Even Twitter, the emails from the Twitter files, where they went back to the FBI and the DOJ and the White House saying, like, yeah, we're not finding this stuff that you're telling us to look for. And then the White House just comes back and says, oh, it's there. Just continue looking for it. White nationalist violent incitement on social media. Who the hell are these white nationalists? I have never met one. It's just weird that they keep pushing this ideology that was like popular in what, the 80s and the 90s. Um, yeah, like the Biden administration's uh, let's see here. Usurpation of the First Amendment. Raskin's cohorts goal is censorship and the accompanying augmentation of state power, not challenging the veracity of opponents' arguments or claims. In shouting COVID in a crowded In shouting COVID in a crowded theater, I discuss how official this was a previous article. How officials in the Biden administration use wartime rhetorical strategies to slander dissidents. In doing so, they conflate dissent with threats to public safety to censor critics. When discussing public health, the regime consistently uses labels of misinformation and disinformation. These are words I am sick and tired of hearing. Okay. You don't get to label something as misinformation or disinformation. That is up for the public to decide. I mean, unless you're admitting that the public school system is just a freaking joke and we don't know how to think for ourselves, um, I don't believe they have the right to label something as such, considering how much they lie to us to begin with. But the more we learn about government operations, the more it appears that these labels are references to inconvenience, not falsity. The strategy extends beyond the country's COVID response. Um, Wednesday's morning, Seymour Hersh published How America Took Out the Nord Stream Pipeline. Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines exploded. We know this. Delivered natural gas. We know this. Although the outlets like the New York Times called the explosions a mystery, then how was I in my basement here / bunker able to figure out right away Yes, we did this. We said we're going to do it. We did it. It's done. Moving along. The sabotage presented a major energy crisis for the United States' European allies. Yeah. Europe imports nearly 40% of its gas from Russia, and the Nord Stream 1 was responsible for delivering approximately one third of that supply. Now, Hirsch reports that the United States executed a covert sea operation with Navy divers to sabotage Russia's pipelines with explosives. Kind of called that one too. For a less as a press corps, this should have been an easy story to crack. Yeah, no kidding. This is what you get with the quality of reporters that we have today. We have to have a geriatric guy from like the baby boomer generation to come out and say like, "Hey, we're familiar with this shit, and we know that we did it." Meanwhile, everyone else is throwing parties and popping Adderall. In the weeks leading up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022, President Biden announced his intention to act against the pipeline in the event of war. If Russia invades, there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. He told reporters, "We will bring an end to it." Yeah, so this is recapping everything about the Nord Stream pipeline. This all follows a similar pattern of the informational warfare of the COVID era. That's what we're referring to it now, the COVID era. I like that. An inconvenient narrative arises. The government and lemmings and in the media slander it as false and dangerous. And months later, the dispute in question turns out to be true, or at least highly plausible. I wonder what they're referring to here. Arguments over natural immunity, vaccine efficacy, mask and lab leak hypothesis, school shutdowns, lockdowns, and the scientific basis of social distancing are just a few examples that follow this cycle of reporting. Yeah. This is one of the reasons I'm bringing back this channel, this news outlet, is the things that are listed in here. Um, this idea that we're not allowed to talk about certain things because so-called experts or propagandists, I'd like to say, are limiting what we can and cannot talk about or learn about. Um, the inability for us to make up our minds on certain things, and for censors, our augmentation of power, not truth, means the chief objective. To achieve this goal, they conflate dissent with domestic terrorism. Yep. For example, the Department of Homeland Security's National Terrorism Advisory Service listed misinformation and disinformation as terrorism threats in February of 2022. You're not allowed to have ideas. The memo identified these threats as efforts to undermine public trust in government. If you stopped ruining our trust by lying to us, we might trust you. It's kind of like being in a bad marriage. You know she's hoeing around. She keeps saying she's not hoeing around, but you're checking her cell phone, dudes are stopping by, neighbors are coming over saying, like, yeah, 5 dudes rolled up in a bus and they were in there for like 3 hours. Um, and then you get home and she's like, but you're supposed to trust me. I love you. Give me your tax money. Regarding both COVID and Ukraine, the most powerful forces in the country have repeatedly lied and misled the American public. They censor critics to protect their delicate narratives of fiction, and they attack others for the public's waning trust in government. Yeah, it's not their fault that you don't trust them. It's yours. You're supposed to just be a good little sheep. Hirsch's article pieces through the hegemonic narrative, hopefully exposing their lies, and warmongering will disrupt their ploys for censorship and power. So that's it. I thought this was a really good article to close with, discussing what's been happening the last couple years. It's been happening longer than that, let's be honest. But when it comes to them shutting down stories, you're not allowed to talk about certain things, using YouTube, Twitter, Facebook to say, like, "You're not allowed to share this information." There is a serious issue here, and there's also recently been the, Wolverine Watchmen, a very, 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 very small group in, Michigan that just went on trial and, convicted for allegedly trying to kidnap the governor of the state. Um, Here's the thing, one of the guys who went on trial and was convicted, he was a very big on the Constitution. He believed in the Constitution, the, constitutional republic, not the democracy that everybody talks about today. He was really big on the founding fathers, and when he was being sentenced, he wanted to do a closing statement, and he wanted to talk about the Constitution, and his lawyers, which they're right to say this, his lawyers told him, "Whatever you do, don't bring up the Constitution because it will feed the idea that you are a domestic terrorist. You're not allowed to talk about the thing that gives the power to the people who are convicting him." And I find that to be really, really odd. So, anyways, that's about it for me today. Are these UFOs that we're shooting down? I surely hope not, but it'd be kind of cool if it was. So, yeah, what are we taking down? Are we going to find that they're just these weird weather balloons like they claimed in Roswell? I don't know. Um, but it just seems like the Pentagon's very hesitant to label it as anything. They're definitely not saying that they're Chinese balloons. They're saying that there's something else and they're powered by God knows what. So, anyways, that's about it for me today. This has been the Collapse Experiment, and keep on typing.